Hiya folks, it's Kikoskia here and welcome back to Writing and Me. This video contains no gameplay or music whatsoever, allowing you to put this in the background while you focus on whatever it is you're doing, whether it's listening to music, writing, working, or wondering if this actually is gameplay footage considering the game in question. All I'd need is some music, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. That aside, today we're going to be focusing on another of the important foundation pillars of a story. We've already spoken about world building, and we've already spoken about the plot. Now, we are going to speak about characters. More often than not, when I talk to people about writing, they tell me that when they first came up with the story, it was the characters that first came to mind, specifically the main character, though sometimes it will be a minor character that first sprung into existence. And characters, just like everything else, make a story what it is. You need those characters to go through the story, through the plot, and the world that you have made for there to be a story. And characters do not necessarily have to be people. You can have a story where the character is the city itself that people live in, and how it changes and develops as time goes on. The character could be a world, the character could be a dinosaur, the character could be a sentient AI. Characters can literally be anything. And that is one of the joys of writing. You can just go, well, this character is going to be a paper cup, and the character is a paper cup. Called paper cup, because let's face it, what else would you call a paper cup? Zem! Well, to be fair, mattresses are called Zem, you can't call a paper cup Zem. Or maybe you can, because, much like anything else, characters are all up to you. You come up with everything about them. And characters are extremely difficult to make. I have said in all the other videos that whatever the topic is in question is very difficult, and characters most certainly are. Stories can fail and fall apart from bad character writing, and some genres rely on characters a lot more than others. Murder mysteries come immediately to mind, where characters are key. They're more important than the actual mystery itself. You not only need to have your characters, the suspects, the investigator, the other people that are around in the area, you need all of them worked out to a fine point. You need their personality and their appearance absolutely crystal clear. You need to know where they were at all times. You need to know how they interact with people. You need to know their supposed motive and their actual motive, and if they're connected to anything at all. For all you know, that Count over there, you think he might be involved in the murder, but in actual fact what he's nervous about is the fact that he doesn't want you to discover that he's having an affair with somebody else in the hotel, and he doesn't want his wife to find out. Because if his wife finds out, his wife will divorce him, and he will lose a lot of money. And yet he loves the person that he's having an affair with, and wouldn't mind if something terrible happened to his wife, but nothing terrible does happen to his wife. It's actually the chef that died, and now he's just hoping that everything will go away. That one example there is just one aspect of one character, and you need to have a lot of information about your main characters, especially your main lead. Now, you don't necessarily have to have one main lead in a story. Your story could have several protagonists that you cycle through as the plot progresses, and that's not bad. I tend to focus on having one main character, but I do switch the point of view from time to other people, because it's always nice to see things from another point of view. Now, with character building, there are so many ways that you can build them, but the one thing I most certainly encourage is that you make sure you take a lot of written notes for all of your characters. If an idea comes to mind about a character trait for someone, or if they like or dislike something, or a quirk in their appearance, write it down. Because with things like a character's description and their personality, you need to be able to cross-reference things at a moment's notice. You also need to be able to cross-reference characters' relationships with other people as well. So make sure you're writing that down too. Before you know it, you're going to end up with a board full of character names with arrows with little things to denote what the arrow means, and it will be an absolute mess. But while other people may look at that thing and not know what's going on, you'll be able to look at it and go, what does Barbatus IV think about Belugian, the salamander monster? Ah, they sort of have a jealous, I'm going to be better than you relationship. Got it. And you can tell just by looking at that, because you've taken very precise and comprehensive notes, what their relationship is. I'd actually recommend cue cards are pretty good for this. If you want just a small amount of information readily accessible, you have a cue card for every character, and when you want to check something, you just pull out the cue card, and there it is. If you need more information, you can of course have a document entirely separate from the main writing that just focuses on information about the characters in particular. Now you may be thinking from what I'm saying here that you need to have everything about your characters all sorted out before you even start writing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you should write down the information about your characters as it comes to you. You don't need everything nailed down when you start, and in fact I recommend that you don't have absolutely everything nailed down. Physical description, most certainly that will be decided before you begin, but as for things they like and dislike, and little quirks of the personality, that stuff can develop and appear as the story goes on. Indeed, characters, much like the setting and the plot, are not set in stone. People do change, and when they're involved in a story, typically characters will change quite a bit because the events will impact them significantly and force them to either change their views or double down on their views and become even more like they already were. You need to both leave room for the character to grow and also accept that your initial vision for a character may change. You may end up having to go back to earlier parts of your writing and alter major parts of your character because you realize halfway through that actually the character is like this and this works better. And that's no bad thing. Going back and changing a character, even the main character, is not bad. That is a sign that you are better understanding the story and the characters that you are writing. And that's good. Now, I've only spoken about major characters right now. What about more minor characters, Kiko? What do I do about them? People that are there for only a chapter, or maybe a scene, or people that only have 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. You don't need to worry so much about nailing down absolutely everything about them. You can happily have a character that says 4 lines, only be described vaguely. You only need to mention in that instance what is important. You may note that their voice is gruff, or that they walk with a limp, or they're armed with a gun. Characters like that are not significant enough for you to devote pages upon pages of description to them, because they're going to be in and out of a story before you know it, and if you're spending all your time writing about them, you're not spending all of your time writing about other, more important characters. Though bear in mind that a background minor character can blossom into a major character as time goes on. They may only appear to begin with for a few lines, and then, 3 chapters later, they're there for a bit more. And then they're there for a bit more, and then they have a longer scene where you actually discover their name, and then you start slowly drip-feeding more things about the character as they become more important. And before you know it, somebody who was literally in the background has become a significant personality, and might as well be a part of the main cast of people. This has happened more than once in my story. A character who, at first, was just, well, that's that person. They did start with a name, but all they basically were was a name, and then eventually they grew and flourished into a main character, with all of the personality and description and quirks that all the other major characters have. The same, of course, can happen in reverse. A character who is major can slowly fade into the background and become a minor character, but that doesn't tend to come with a loss of description and personality. What it does, however, mean is that character typically, you don't get as many updates as to the changes in the character, because of course you're not interacting with them as much. That's not to say the character has to change at all while they're in the background, because sometimes they don't. Such is the nature of characters. But if it does happen, the main characters aren't going to notice until they either hear from somebody else about it, or go and see them. And then it could be quite a surprise indeed. Another thing that can happen is that you can be writing a scene, and you think, how are the characters going to react to this? And before you think, you go, well, this character is like this, and this has happened to them, and so naturally, this is how they would react. That is the sign that you have written a character of enough substance, with their own drives and goals and dreams and fears, that they can tell you effectively what they would do, because that is what their personality screams at you. Let's go, well, this person really, really hates people that cheat people out of their money. And so when they see the greedy taxman trying to extort money out of the poor, their first reaction is to stand up to them. You don't need to think about that, because you know from their personality and their past what they think. Now, you will have to still go in your head and go, is that what they'll do? Yes, okay, that's what they'll do, because sometimes they might not do that. You do need to still think, just in case there is an external factor that is making it difficult. Imagine that same situation again, but this time the taxman has 4 guards with them, and the person, while they really want to go and confront the taxman, can't deal with the 4 guards, and so they won't directly confront the taxman. Instead, they will go to the people that have been extorted afterwards and give some of their money away so that they're not out of pocket, and then they will come up with a different way of dealing with the taxman. You've got to make sure that what's happening ultimately makes sense, because you don't want your character to do something inadvertently out of character because you latched onto one thing that they would have done, but not took into account other things that they also would keep in mind. Characters are not one-note things. Minor characters, you may look at them and go, well, they only really have that trait that defines them, but that's because they're only there for half a page and you never see them again. You don't need to have a minor character sit you down and go, hi, my name is Dave, and I am the guard. Did you know that when I was younger, my family were murdered by dragons, and then I went on a crusade to defeat dragons, and blah blah blah, here's 5 pages of exposition, when really, this isn't important because you're not going to see me beyond the scene, but hey! Dragon killing story, isn't that cool? Don't you wish I was a main character? Unfortunately not, I'm just gonna stand here. In you go! In you go! Sometimes a character just comes to my head immediately. I know their name, I know what they look like, I know their personality, and I know where they fit in the story, and it's quite easy to just write all that information down and have that as the foundation. But other times I know vaguely the personality of the character and who they are, but I don't know their name, and I don't know what they look like, and not having that gives the character in my mind a certain vagueness. Even characters that you do not see in a story that are important, I tend to give a description, just in case they do end up becoming important, and also so that when a scene is taking place where you can hear them and can't see them, I know what they look like, so I can picture it in my mind as the scene plays out. I'm going to give you how I do things there, and it may sound silly, but it does work, and that is, when it comes to names, I tend to just look up a list of names. Because when I'm creating a character, I try my best to make the names as organic as possible, in that I don't want 2 farmers to have a child and go, what shall the baby be called? Clearly this baby is going to grow up with us dying in his teens, and then he will become a demon slayer to avenge us, so we must call him Asganar Demon Slayer. Parents do not name their children like that. Parents instead will more often than not name their children like, I think John is a good name. Yes, John. We'll call him John. Oh, wait, we'll call him John David. David after my father. That sounds like a good idea. John David. And thus the child was called John David. If the child was called something extraordinary and nobody else was, they most certainly would get a lot of attention for that, and you might as well be screaming to the readers, "This character is important! This character is important!" Note that it is absolutely fine for said character to be called something extraordinary, provided that people take note of how extraordinary that name is. If attention is drawn to the unusualness, that works, and of course you have to take into account the setting in question. If everyone is called something like Asganar Demon Slayer, that name is not going to be extraordinary. In that situation, John David would certainly be interesting, and you'd be looking at that going, "That's an odd name, I wonder what's up with that." And odd names do certainly happen in real life, so there is a precedent for having people with unusual names every now and again. But if all of your main characters stand out because their names are really unusual in comparison to everyone else around them, then that sort of pulls people out of the immersion somewhat. Fair enough, if everyone is an elf and they all have elven names, that makes sense. But if everyone is a dwarf and you have somebody called Uzgunar, and Uzgunar is definitely not a dwarven name, then there's some questions raised, and if they're not explained, that really stands out. So for names, I do that. As for descriptions, if I can't sort it out in my head myself, I pull up the D&D 3.5 character description tables, and I roll. I roll for the height, and I roll for the weight, and for hair and eye colour, I make my own little table with different options, and I roll for it. And so I leave everything there to chance, for characters where I can't pin down what I want beforehand. Sometimes I stick with the results, sometimes the results are used as a starting point for me to narrow down myself what traits they want. If I roll one eye colour and I go, actually no, that really doesn't work now I think about it. It should actually be this eye colour. Rolling for it has helped me make a decision. The information that I get from just picking names at random and going with the tables will then give me the bare bones that I can then use to continue to build the character, changing things if I need to. Note, this is only one way to generate characters. This is not the be-all and end-all way, and as stated in previous videos, if you have a method for generating characters that works for you, stick with it. The most important thing is to find something that works for you, and stick with it. And finally, I'm going to talk about something that I imagine some people are waiting for me to talk about, and that is avoiding certain pitfalls when designing characters. Now, people may look at a character you've made and go, "Oh, well, I've seen that character trait before, and that before, and that before. Your character is cliché." Remember back from when I described plots that all of the basic plots have been done. The same can be said for characters. All basic character ideas have been done. It's what you do with the combination of character traits, personality, description. It's what you do and what you add that makes the character yours. That is not a bad thing. What is a bad thing is if you make a character that is so wholly unbelievable and absurd that you entirely break the flow of the story and the immersion. I'm talking about characters like, for example, a Mary Sue or a Marty Stew. For those who don't know what a Mary Sue or a Marty Stew is, Mary Sues and Marty Stews are characters that are so unbelievable and powerful and distorting that they literally warp the story around them. The original Mary Sue character is a character in a Star Trek fanfiction, and my does the story bend over backwards to show off Mary Sue as this absolutely perfect, wonderful, brilliant character that everyone loves and can do no wrong, and they've done all of these amazing things, they never fail at anything, and everybody's just going, "Wow, isn't that character so amazing? Boy, I wish I was that character. That would be awesome. I wish I was that character too. I want to be their friend. I'm also going to be their friend." Well, good news! That character is everybody's friend, even the villain. The villain will look at them and be like, "Gee, I want to commit evil, but you're so amazing and charismatic and persuasive and awesome, and actually I don't want to commit evil anymore. Actually, I love you. Love me." Well, what a coincidence. I also love them. We all love this character. That's the kind of thing that a Mary Sue character is, and Mary Sue characters have a lot of variations. You have Mary Sues, you have anti-Sues, villain Sues, fixer Sues. There are so many different subcategories of this kind of character. But the ultimate thing to take away from it is you've got to make sure that your characters are believable and do not distort everything about them. If you have a character that literally can solve everything without trying, who is perfect and amazing and the most wonderful person in the universe, that character really isn't believable, and it will show that they really don't belong. Most importantly, the reader will notice this, they'll look at this character and go, really? Oh look, they've solved that problem, and that problem, that was never an issue. I don't really feel like they're ever in any danger, and there's no real character development for this person because their character is already perfect, and everybody already likes them, and I'm going to put this book down now, and I'm going to do this. There are, of course, exceptions to this. If you're in a setting where every character is like that, then you will have differences between the various characters, and then you have something that is not what I just described. Everyone is on the same relative level. Everybody can potentially solve problems like that. Everybody is wonderful and amazing and perfect. And when everyone is that, comparatively no one is that. And then you have something that you can build on. Maybe people turn up that are even better, and then the people that aren't as good now then have to team up to defeat that person. Or maybe there is a super powerful evil villain who isn't swayed by the other characters and then starts killing everyone. All the little things there, building up to make differences and make it interesting, because ultimately that's what your characters are there for. That's what the plot is there for. That's what the world building is there for. It's there to keep the reader interested, keep the reader entertained, and have them want to go on and read more of the story. They are there on the journey just like your characters are, and the world you're building, and the plot that is progressing. They're all going on the same path together through the pages, and ultimately, you want them to be entertained, you want them to enjoy it. Now, that's not to say that the character that you have as the lead has to be a likeable character. They don't. But they do have to be someone that the reader wants to read about. Whether it's they want them to succeed, or they want them to fail, or they want to find out how they deal with the problem that's in front of them, you want them to be engaged, and if you've written a character that people care about, you have succeeded, because if they care about them, they want to see what happens to them, and so they will read on. And so in conclusion, characters are exceptionally important. They're very difficult to make. Do not worry about a character changing as you write. Do not worry about the minor characters in terms of how much you describe them, though characters can grow into more significant characters as time goes on. They can come from the background into the fore. If you are very stuck on designing characters, go for something random as a start, and use that as a basis. And also, avoid characters that literally warp everything around them, because if you have them in there, such characters detrimentally impact the story they're in. I've talked a fair bit about characters, but there's still a fair bit more to discuss. And when we come back, folks, we will go into a facet of characters that a lot of people ask me about, that I'm very keen to discuss, and that is character death. It may not be in your story, but if it is, or you're thinking about it being in your story, how do you deal with it? We're going to talk about that next time. And so, folks, when we come back, more videos about writing and me. And I'll catch you next time, folks, and I'll see you then. Later.